Prototype cards are, well, prototypes. These cards are often incomplete. They have strange fonts, weird holo patterns, different coloring, and they represent different stages of the development process of Pokemon cards. And in this specific scenario, from Japanese to English. By the way, this is the prototype Blastoise, otherwise known as Protozois. Only a handful of these exist, and 4 have been authenticated and graded by CGC. 3 of the 4 here were printed on Magic the Gathering cardstock, so the back of the card is actually the back of a Magic card. The 4th is just printed on a blank sheet, therefore the back is blank. You can also see that the font is unique, the format is weird, and the phrasing is unusual. And you'll recognize this Blastoise artwork from the original Game Boy game. This is Sugimori artwork, and it was also used for the CD promo Blastoise. But the Blastoise on the prototype you can see is a little bit smaller, so we can actually see more of the illustration's background, and this was actually a key factor in authenticating these cards. Next, I wanted to add in the Disco Holo base set cards. Basically, there's a handful of Disco Holo base set cards out there. These were printed shortly after the release of base set back in January 1999, and all of the base set holos were printed, minus Machamp, of course. Now, these look just like normal English base set cards, but a few assets are missing, like the evolution box Pokemon and the energy symbols. But the name comes from the holo pattern used. It's very unique, and we've seen it nowhere else. The theory is that Wizards was simply trying out different holo patterns, and these are the ones that eventually snuck through and accidentally got released to the public. We also have various test prints from the Jungle expansion. These look a little more familiar but have white borders, and like Blastoise, the corners are square. So the reason why many of these have square corners is because they weren't cut at the factory, which makes them non-factory cut, or NFC for short. Employees would pull these sheets from the line before getting cut, simply because the cutting wasn't necessary. Back in 2001, the format of Pokemon cards changed to the E-Series, and you bet we got to look at some of those prototypes. Here we have some images of the early e-reader card designs, which look absolutely horrible, but I really like them. Interestingly, we can see that the e-reader strips were tested going around the entire card instead of just the left and bottom border. And they also retain the card's original border, instead of making the e-reader strip part of the border, and some of these cards have numbers smack in the middle for some identification reason. And to finish off this segment of the video, we have the oldest Pokemon cards ever known to exist. These were authenticated and graded by CGC in 2023 and really embody what a prototype is. There's so much to unpack here, like the energy symbol's early ideation and the size of the cards being so small. But we can see many properties that still exist to this day, like the stats shown below the illustration, or the weakness and the resistance down at the bottom. It's cool to see that the overall format of the card was agreed upon so early on. And we can visualize a bit of a timeline here with this page from the August 1996 volume of CoroCoro Comic, where the prototype design was first made public. These old cards aren't printed on cardstock either. They're made of paper glued onto cardstock. Some collectors will question the authenticity even after they've been authenticated and graded by CGC, which honestly is fair for something this incredible and unique. The trainer decks are considered the first appearance of Base Set Unlimited, released in early 1999. And they were sent to some card and game stores that were part of the Beta Pokemon League program, which was mostly Toys R Us stores at the time. Their purpose was to teach people how to play the TCG, so store owners and the people running the Pokemon League events would have knowledge of the game and be able to teach the younger players. We have two different versions of the trainer deck, A and B, and you can tell them apart pretty quickly by the red markings on the back. There will be a red border with a respective A or B in the center. Some people consider these decks prototypes, and I think that's a really good discussion for another video. But if Wizards was gathering some sort of data or feedback on this product, then I think it's fair to say that its function was at least similar to a prototype. Trainer Deck A is Brock's deck, so it's made up of fighting type Pokemon, a couple of normal types, some trainer cards, and of course fighting energies, 27 to be exact. This deck also contains a non-holo Machamp. Yeah, this guy. The card that every kid had in 1999, but not every kid had this one. Not only does it have the red markings on the back, but like I said, it's non-holo, and more interestingly, this is the only Machamp that is not first edition. Now let's take a look at Trainer Deck B. This is Misty's deck and thus features water-type Pokemon. It's a pretty good inverse of Deck A with plenty of water Pokemon, a couple of normal types, trainer cards, and the same amount of water energies. The real showstopper of this product though is the Blastoise. This is a non-holo, and it's actually the only non-holo base set Blastoise intentionally made by Wizards. It's a pretty serious collector's piece if you have one. And if you browse the market, you might notice that Deck B cards are a lot more expensive than Deck A cards. And while the whole concept would suggest that these were shipped together, we don't think that was actually the case. In reality, there are much more Deck A's out there than Deck B's, and because the franchise was so young, we don't have a lot of documentation or data on these. It's mostly speculation, and it's very possible that Deck B with Blastoise was never shipped out to the Pokemon Leagues and found its way into the market in an unorthodox way. If you have any English holo fossil cards, they probably have the star foil holo pattern, just like base set or jungle. But there are some lucky collectors out there that have different holo fossil cards. These are the highly sought after and elusive Cosmos foil fossil cards. It's simple really, they are identical to regular fossil cards but have the Cosmos holo pattern. Now English cards didn't get the Cosmos foil pattern until base set 2, so something doesn't add up here. There are 15 in total, but Zapdos did actually get a Cosmos version from the Tempest theme deck, which means many of you watching, as well as myself, actually own this one. It took a while, but eventually these cards were traced back to Washington, where the Wizards of the Coast was headquartered. Some former Wizards employees have made statements confirming that these cards were given directly to employees as a gift. But why were they printed in the first place? Well, they were likely just a test for the Cosmos foil pattern for base set 2. And these cards are hard to find, straight up. I've seen them pop up on eBay over the years, but as you can imagine, they auction for high prices. I live about 4 hours away from Washington, so I've always dreamed of finding some of these at a yard sale or something. The 4 position only cards are test cards, so they're prototypes as well, but these are a little bit different. They have the text 4 position only right on top of the illustration. These cards were actually inserted into packs though, which means they have rounded corners, by the way, but not just any packs, legendary collection packs, even though these cards were expedition test prints. They were strictly for internal use among the design team at Wizards. And when these packs were supposed to be discarded, they were ultimately salvaged from the bin by an employee who later introduced them into the secondary market through TCA Gaming. The 4 position only cards consist of Charizard, Alakazam, Blastoise, Ampharos, Arbok, Dugtrio, Clefable, and Manhole. Now, the Manhole card obviously isn't a Pokemon, but it does have a Pokemon card back on it, which makes it a really cool collectible piece. The Matchprint cards are controversial, and I'll tell you why. Some collectors argue that these aren't Pokemon cards, or cards more specifically. These were printed for the purpose of color matching, and so they weren't printed onto traditional cardstock, but a thick kind of paper instead. They have square corners because they didn't go through the regular cutting process that cards go through at the factory. TCA Gaming introduced these about a decade ago, but many have chosen to not officially recognize them as cards because of the fact that they aren't technically cards, but also because they could theoretically be very easy to reproduce with a printer at home. Even this point is contested though, because the thought of reproducing printing factory quality at home on your home printer is kind of absurd. But the theory remains. The fact is that if you had access to this type of equipment, it is very possible that you might be able to recreate these. Are they authentic? Well, the ones in the TCA gaming video probably are, but PSA will not grade this. However, CGC does, so if you're looking to pick some of these up, just be careful. But they're still really cool either way. They are expedition cards and they're also super glossy, which is pretty unique. Tsunekaze Ishihara, the president of the Pokemon Company since 2001. He can be seen on this card with Rotom. So Ishihara actually handed these cards out himself to some of his closest friends at his 60th birthday party, which was a private event. Ishihara is an ultra beast, and deservingly so. An unknown amount of copies were distributed, but Heritage Auctions claims that the number is somewhere between 30 and 200. Thanks. And at the time of writing this video, PSA has graded 11 copies and CGC has graded 12, so that's at least 23 copies out there right now, and some of these have sold for $50,000. I wonder if Ishihara handed these out with sleeves and top loaders, or if he just handed them out raw, so guests would have to put them like in their pocket or their purse or something. In December 2021, what I believe to be one of the coolest things ever was released, and this was the final product for the 25th anniversary of Pokemon. This is a half deck, meaning 30 cards, and each card represents a year, beginning with a prototype Chansey for 1995. Some other notable cards would be Charizard, Rocket Zapdos, Charmeleon, Mewtwo EX, Professor Oak's Hint, and a handful of energy cards. The reverse of each card has a unique back detailing the year the card represents and whatever significant Pokemon event that happened that year. This half deck, which was packaged in a beautiful wooden box, also came bundled with other goodies, one of which was a set of sleeves with the original Pokemon card back on them, which I find particularly appealing. But here's the catch, this wasn't something that you could buy. This was a gift from the Pokemon Company creatures, handed out to employees, Pokemon card illustrators, and other individuals who were integral to Pokemon's success over the years. The total number of creatures decks produced is unknown, and as you can imagine, many individuals who received this amazing gift kept quiet and they didn't publicly reveal their copies of the cards. But some have actually sent the cards in to get graded and have put them up for auction. That's right, you can buy some of these if you have a spare 50k lying around. Feel free to check out my other videos, and thank you for watching.